Speaking of markets and people who know a lot about them, the brothers Nigerian join us now, John and Pete, the co-founders of Market Rebellion. Welcome to you both. I think it's the first I've had, I think both of you on television separately, but now I realize together I'll have no idea who's speaking. So I'll say, John, I think I know John. If you could start us off. This idea, right? Years ago, you talked to anyone and everyone pretty much on Wall Street and say tariffs, bad, terrible. I feel like some of that's changing since Trump's first term, and now there's more open-minded and nuanced conversation. What's your view, John, on what the president is trying to do this time, Trump 2.0, when it comes to tariffs?
Right, Connell, and you said it. I mean, President Biden kept many of those tariffs in place, even expanded some of them. Why would a president do that? Clearly, we would pay more if indeed we have to put a tariff, a tax, if you will, on imported goods like steel, like aluminum, and so forth. Why would they do it? Well, U.S. jobs, that's one reason, because as you said, China had been stockpiling aluminum forever. When they finally had enough and they weren't using it in their country as much, they dump it then over in our country. And as they dump it, they push the prices down for our goods, and our plants can't make a profit. So the idea is, if you don't tax it to keep the price competitive with our prices, then you're going to put a lot of Americans out of work. I think a lot of steel workers are happy to see this because you definitely push up the demand for U.S. steel. And I don't just mean that stock. I mean steel produced in the United States, but it is a tax. It will be paid by consumers, whether that's a builder, whether that's an automaker like GM, Ford, Tesla, for that matter. Everybody pays a little bit, but again, your choices are, do you want your jobs here in this country? Right. And do you want a
So do you distinguish, do we distinguish maybe, Pete, do we distinguish in some ways between an across-the-board tariff? Say he goes, all right, we're going to do 25% on Canada and Mexico, okay, versus more targeted approaches where you're going after specific products. I mean, it's obviously by definition protectionist. I mean, the president would say as much. He's trying to protect jobs. That's what that means. Sure. But is that more sensible or more easier to defend than an across-the-board tariff from an economic perspective, Pete?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, I think the reality is when you look at this, when we talk about China, let's be honest, we're talking about somebody who manipulates their currency, right? They have cheap steel that they're willing to dump on us, as John was just saying, that's been lining up for years and years, and all of a sudden they suddenly drop that on us as well. And the problem is, how do we compete? How is there an even playing field? And I think that's really what we're looking for here. I mean, there are so many beautiful little cities around the United States that were so big in the steel industry that got run out because of the fact that they can't compete. And this actually gives them a leg to stand on, maybe not both, but at least one leg to stand on, so they can actually get into an actual competition. And I think that's what we were seeing in the stock market today, because when you take a look and you see something like a Cleveland Cliffs, for instance, going up 20% today, there's a good reason behind that. Folks are seeing exactly what the direction is right now of the U.S. steel makers, as John was talking about, not just U.S. Steel itself, but all of them. It really is an impact that we're seeing today, along with some of the aluminum companies as well.
Okay, so let's talk about that as a final point then with Pete first, then John. We'll reverse the order. Stocks. So we talked about individual stocks that do well, and obviously that makes sense. For the overall market, I did think it was interesting that today was not a day. Maybe it's just bouncing back from Friday a little bit, but today was not a day it went down with all this tariff talk. What would you expect from markets, Pete and John? So that's what people are looking at, their 401ks, and whether there's going to be a lot of pressure if all this continues, all this back and forth continues.
Yeah, there's going to be some down days. And let's be honest, when you talk about tariffs, you will have some times where it's not going to be great early on. And I think the president has actually laid that out in front of everybody. Hey, it might be tough early, but over time, this is the right way to do it, and the way to do it to actually get to the point of where we were aiming for. So I think that he's really got himself into a great spot. I think there's multiple companies out there where the CEOs have got his ear, and he actually has been listening. And I think he's doing exactly as they're talking about. How do we compete into the future? And I think he's doing a great job on that.
Your thought on that, John, people's 401ks?
Yeah, I think overall, Connell, we're going to see, like Pete said, if you want to call it volatility or uncertainty, you'll see some of that. And on some of these days, you will see down markets. Other days, like today, the market will shrug it right off and say,
Right.
but boy, look at how well we're doing in this sector or that sector. So broadly, unless some of the investors watching your show, and I'm sure there are a lot, but the investors watching it aren't all in just one sector, I think they're going to be just fine. Diversification helps them in times like this. And I think overall, many of these industries will come back under these kinds of tariffs, and others will, of course, have to change their modus operandi a little bit. We've seen that with NVIDIA. We've seen it with many of the chip stocks, even AMD. Those will start making a comeback as well, even though some of their exports are being, if not banned, certainly restricted pretty severely to go into China, for instance.
Yeah, we might hear more from the president on all of this later this hour, so we'll cover that. John and Pete, thanks. John and Pete Najarian with us.